Good morning, everyone. My name is Gina Stewart. I'm the Executive Director of the BWI Business Partnership, and we'd like to thank you this morning for joining us for our first webinar, our T3 series. And without our sponsors, we would not be able to host these types of programs. So you'll indulge me for one moment to thank our sponsors, MDOT, MTA, MDOT, MAA, BWI Marshall Airport, Tipton Airport, and WSP. So thank you to our sponsors of the series. And now before I introduce our speakers, just a little bit of logistics with this webinar. We are in about a 20-second delay. You are, as attendees, are muted, so you will not be able to speak. However, there is a question bubble, a little word bubble, where you can type in your questions, and please, we encourage you to type those questions in during the presentation so we can be prepared for myself to moderate those questions to our panelists after the presentation. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker this morning, Mayor Gavin Buckley. He is the mayor of the city of Annapolis, was elected in November of 2017. His business background as a restaurateur has bid him well to lead the city of Annapolis as mayor. He's been instrumental in the revitalization plan for Annapolis City Dock. And without further ado, I'd like to have Mayor Gavin Buckley speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on here. Welcome to everybody who is watching. If you've ever been to this beautiful city of Annapolis and you know a little bit about it, you know that we don't agree on a lot of things. The city is about to enter into its biggest municipal project in its history, a potential $50 million revitalization of the city and garage replacement. How did we get here? We got here by bringing people together and getting a lot of stakeholders involved in a project for improvements to the dock. So we managed to get 100 volunteers to step forward to create a vision for our city dock. And we worked on the things that we have in common. And one of the things that we have in common in this city is experiencing nuisance flooding. If you have ever come to the city of Annapolis on a sunny day and been stopped from going to City Dock because the water level was too high, or you haven't been able to come across the Eastport Bridge because you've had to be turned around because the water has come past the Fleet Reserve and flooded Compromise Street, you know that is the thing that in the city of Annapolis that we deal with all the time. That flooding that happens in the city of Annapolis is not because of stormwater, it is because of storm surge. So water gets pushed up the Chesapeake Bay, into the storm drains, up through the grates and in front of the businesses. It has been a nuisance problem in this city for decades. So we knew that's what sea level rise is going to look to this city. We knew that this city would have to tackle that. And we knew that the best real estate in the city belongs to the automobile. The stakeholders that came together to solve this problem all understand that if we don't do something about the rising tides, that if we don't tackle that problem, we won't have a historic district. We won't have a naval academy because it will be underwater. So an amazing group of stakeholders got together, spent a year coming up with a consensus plan for the city dock in Annapolis. That consensus plan raises city dock roughly 6 feet, builds a beautiful public space, a grassed area that will not only be a place where the community can meet, but it'll also be a place where we can filter stormwater. Currently, any water that hits the city dock parking lot in the summer especially heats up and just rolls straight into Spar Creek. It will not only filter that, but it will also create a barrier against the water as it comes at us in the future. And lastly, one of the things that happens in terms of City Dock is that we have conditioned people to park on the waterfront. Most people that come to Annapolis try to drive to City Dock and get a parking space. There's 150 parking spaces there roughly. When they don't get that parking space on the weekend, they drive around the block. They cause gridlock on the Eastport Bridge at Gate 1 of the Naval Academy. They burn up more fossil fuel. When we rebuild the garage, we will rebuild it with smart technologies so that when you come into the city down Road Boulevard, you will know there are no parking spaces at that area particularly. There will be some, but not the ones that you expect. And how we're going to pay for this is through a P3 of replacing our most lucrative garage in the city, which is the Hillman Garage. The Hillman Garage is a 450-car garage just off of Main Street behind Chicken Ruth's. That garage has been at the end of its useful life for a long time now. We plan to ground lease that garage to a company who will increase its capacity from 450 cars to 700 cars. We'll also contribute money to the revitalization of City Dock, and then potentially use some of the remaining parking spaces there and competitively price those. And so that will be one of the financing mechanisms that we used for this big $50 million project. The other mechanisms we will use to pay for it will be the federal resiliency grants that we will be entitled to, as will every city in America. And then also our partner in this thing will be the US Naval Academy. They will be protecting the Naval Academy as the Department of Defense protects all of its bases around the country. When they get their financing online, there will be eligibility for the city to get some funds for the City Dock. And the fourth thing we will be doing is the City of Annapolis spearheaded a financing authority, which just is going through the state now, has cleared most of the votes, is waiting for the sign off by the governor. That resiliency financing authority enables every municipality in Maryland to potentially set up its own way to finance the infrastructure that is going to be needed to deal with climate change, sea level rise, wherever you are on that. So we have 4 funding mechanisms. So we have had many ideas on what to do with City Dock. We've had many studies done. Most of them have sat on a shelf. Lots of people have great ideas, but great ideas are just ideas unless you have a way to pay for them. We have a way to pay for this. We have an amazing team of volunteers that have put this idea together. And through that community involvement, we have an amazing plan that is going to be the game changer for the city of Annapolis. And we know when we get out of this crisis that we're in now, that the public are going to want to give back. They're going to want to get involved. They're going to want to come together. But we are creating a great place for them to do that. Thank you.
This is Eileen Fogarty. Thank you so much, Mayor Buckley, for your comments, but more importantly, it's been the mayor's vision that has propelled this entire effort forward. As I said, my name is Eileen Fogarty. I'm chair of the City Dock Action Committee, and with me this morning, I have Bryce Turner, who has been the chair of our design team. He's president of BCT Architects in Baltimore. John Hammond, who is the chair of our financial tools team. He was for many years the chief financial officer at Anne Arundel County. And Ian Pfeiffer, chair of our parking and transportation team, who is a former Annapolis alderperson. So with that said, we are delighted, all of us, that you're joining us today to talk about this transformation. Next slide, please, Kate. On the next slide, you'll see what we're bringing forward is the result of actually about 8 months work, but more importantly, there are 20 years before that of ongoing plans, efforts that have culminated in this point in time. The most recent effort was a technical advisory panel for the Urban Land Institute. And last January 2019, they brought forward report, Reclaiming a Local and National Treasure, and that triggered our entire effort. And it triggered the partnership. Historic Annapolis and the city joined partners for this entire effort. And then we were very fortunate to have the Park Service, National Park Service, as well as Anne Arundel County. They are all partners in this CDAC effort. Next, please. What has been, I think, made a difference with this effort as opposed to all the plans before us is that there is an immediate call to action. This picture was taken in the middle of this past October during the boat show. And you can see, as well as everybody else can see, that we are in a situation where we can no longer kick the ball down, kick the can down the road. We're flooded 52 days a year, and we are facing, the downtown is facing an imminent threat from sea level rise. Next, please. With this threat comes an opportunity. And the opportunity is really the kind of opportunity that Annapolitans have been talking about for years. And that is to reinvigorate our state's capital, reinvigorate our downtown, and create, as the mayor described, a proud public place with purpose at our city dock. We will be launching what we believe, in collaboration with the Naval Academy, will be a national prototype for a resiliency effort. Next, please. So the City Dock Action Committee, the mayor said that the group came together, it was actually last March when the group came together. And we had two very clear missions. One was to build a broad-based consensus. Without that buy-in, without that consensus, you wind up where all the other plans have wound up, and that is on the shelf. The other mission has been to identify very clear steps so that the council, the city, all of our partners can move forward immediately. The group that was brought together, 92 committed Annapolitans, people from the arts community, environmentalists, financial experts, business owners, downtown residents, architects, preservationists, the marine trades. They all came together, and since I was now in charge of this 92-person committee, we all realized that for it to really be successful, we broke it into working groups by topic. These groups have been amazing. Everything you see in the report, Transforming City Dock, as well as what we're going to present today, has come out of the work of volunteers of 8 months intensive efforts. Next, please. The other piece that the volunteers took on was this amazing outreach effort. Again, we all understood that without the community support, we didn't have anything. We held 22 workshops, work sessions. One of them had 250 people attending. We had presentations and workshops with the council, with the downtown businesses, with the residents. Through that process evolved a direction, with really a bottoms up direction for the city dock. Next, please. It became clear that rather than sort of avoid these long-standing issues and come up with just some gorgeous plans about what we'd all like to see, that the best approach was to confront those issues, address head-on the threat from flooding, address the parking issue, which of course for years everybody avoids because it's a complex and controversial issue, addressed access to downtown, and perhaps most importantly, really start talking to the business and residential community about how their futures are inextricably linked. The viability of the business community is tied directly to the health of the residential community, that out of this effort has come a partnership between the city, the residents, and the businesses. And of course, as we look today at the incredible threat facing downtown Annapolis, as well as the rest of the world, we can see how important this partnership is. Next, please. What we will be sharing in just a couple of minutes is the expectations of all of these groups woven together by our design professionals into what we call a consensus plan. Next, please. The most exciting part today, March 26th, is that this effort is actually taking place. Council heard and endorsed this plan on the 14th of January. The Planning Commission has supported it, and now the city has gone out and received bids to rebuild Hillman Garage, bids to redevelop the city dock. We are in the midst of selecting a consortium of firms. We anticipate that to be group of firms to be selected by the summer. At the same time, the state delegation has been very supportive. They've introduced legislation to create a resiliency authority. We would hope that by next winter, winter 2021, we would be demolishing and reconstructing the Hillman Garage. And by winter 2022, the start of the redevelopment of City Dock would take place. Next, please. When many people have asked all of us, why do you think we have success now when all these other efforts, these 9, 10 other plans have not moved forward? And the answer is very simple. First, we have, is there an image with that slide? Kate? Why don't we go to the next slide? First of all, we have the urgency of the moment, and that can't be understated because everyone realizes we have to take action. Secondly, we have the momentum, not just of the 92 members, but also of all the interests they represented and all the people that they have brought in this outreach process. We have the partnerships, which are critical, and we have a realistic financial approach. So with all of that in place, each one of the teams has immediate recommendations that we are now in the process of bringing forward so that the community and tourists as well will be seeing changes starting in the next couple of months. So people will realize this is going to happen. Residential community is working together to identify flexible areas for family activities, water access. Next, please, Kate. The Maritime Group has organized, which is amazing. They have mobilized the marine trades organizations and people in the maritime community to start to activate the waterfront, create a gateway to the bay. Next, please. The resiliency experts that we have been working directly, collaborating with the United States Naval Academy so that there'll be flood protection from gate 0 all the way to the Fleet Reserve. Next, please. And the business community, we've had 15 of the local businesses working directly with us, and then they have been outreaching to the rest of the businesses. They were skeptical at the initial start of this effort, but they have been amazing. They have been part of looking at the parking. They have really come to embrace having a great public space, and they are working with us right now in terms of being ready for reopening the city dock. Next, please. And John, I'm going to turn this over to John Hammond right now.
Good morning, everyone. A pleasure to speak to you and welcome the opportunity. As you've heard from the mayor and Eileen, there basically are 3 components to the capital program involved with this City Dock Action Committee. The first is an immediate plan to deal with an interim parking strategy and implement some basic parking infrastructure needs of the city probably somewhere in $100,000 to $200,000. And the focus is to get the parking consumer in the right location and providing relief to the Hillman parking garage being out of service during the demolition and replacement. The items involved in this immediate would be things like signage, real-time parking infrastructure, information, a user-friendly shuttle system. Short term, as you've heard, one of the major pieces is the reconstruction of the Hillman parking garage, which is off of Main Street. We have to demolish it and expand it up to maybe 550 to 700 spaces. That's about a $30 million project. And then the third piece is our intermediate term, which is the resiliency and CDAC street state improvements, and to make it a real proud public space in downtown Annapolis. And we're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million. The plan of finance is aggregates to a potential cost of around $80 million. The capital improvements envisioned are essential to the future viability of Annapolis. The CDAC is a central component of the uniqueness of Annapolis because of it serves as the state's capital city, the county seat of Anne Arundel County. It's the host to the United States Naval Academy and is the hub for the tourism industry in Anne Arundel County, and particularly, and also the state of Maryland. After all, Annapolis served as our nation's first capital city, as it was the capital during the ratification of the Treaty of Paris, which ended the Revolutionary War. And we have a host of 18th and 19th century structures in the downtown area. The recommendation of our our recommendation calls for a development authority of some sort that you heard the mayor and Eileen talk about. We might be able to use existing quasi-governmental operation like Medco or the Stadium Authority, so we can focus on these large capital projects like the Hillman Garage and the resiliency program. But we do believe that the financing mechanism that we're going to utilize to effectuate these projects ought not to rely upon residential property taxes from the citizens of Annapolis, but instead be structured to spread the cost of the public improvements among a wide spectrum of beneficiaries using a menu of taxes, fees, special assessments, grants, and some public finance tools that will likely require a dedicated funding source. We're very optimistic that we can pull a plan together and get started in a very timely fashion and truly make Annapolis the vision that as a child growing up in Annapolis, I heard from our Chamber of Commerce, which was we may be historically old, but we're going to be progressively new. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to Eileen.
Next slide for Ian Pfeiffer.
Thank you very much, Eileen. And it's wonderful to be with all of you today. I chaired the parking, bicycling, and pedestrian work group, and you know, one of the real pleasures, I served on the Annapolis City Council for 8 years, and as the mayor laid out, you know, we've had a whole history of reports written and thought, you know, sort of interesting ideas about this, but we've unfortunately have rarely got close to enacting any of them. And you know, in this moment with this large group of stakeholders, you know, in my parking group, it was really exciting to sort of put together folks who are operating businesses in the community, residents, and then really national, international parking experts, folks who have deep expertise across the country in intelligent transportation services, and sort of a variety of experiences, who all rolled up their sleeves and got together and donated their time to start to have a conversation about what should be happening downtown, and how to think about this really from a short-term solution and more of a long-term solution. So we were able to put together sort of a comprehensive strategy, which basically is trying to figure out how to take those parking spots off City Dock and allow CDAC to be converted to this community serving uses that we're talking about, but by creating sort of slack in the existing parking systems nearby. And it was really important to our business owners and residents that there was no net loss of parking. And as the mayor laid out, the eventual rebuilding of Hillman, will answer part of this, by pushing up the total number of spots in the Main Street CDAC corridor. But we realized in talking to these transportation experts, and as well as the folks in the city's Department of Transportation, our parking contractor currently, that there's a lot of things that can be done even before that, and that we really had a system where our on-street parking and our off-street parking, those assets controlled by the city and controlled by private hands, we're not connected in a smart way. We have basically differing times on meters that were created at different times. It is sort of and basically certain meters that shut off at certain times, and others there's not a lot of connectivity to that. So in trying to move forward with that, we basically have decided and recommended basically trying to put together a comprehensive parking strategy that would basically analyze all of these elements and make recommendations of how to do that. And the key components of this sort of strategic approach is in part about technology, as John referenced. I mean, so how people get information when they approach a community, whether they're frequent visitors here or they're coming here for the first time. We need to really step up our game on sort of our web platform and the apps people use to communicate about parking and sort of what's available in real time, signage and sort of all of those elements of wayfinding that have lagged behind here, but that many of us see as you travel to other parts of the country, need to be implemented as part of this solution downtown to drive people to where the parking is. We see next bus technology we use in lots of places, and that's certainly sort of an element of how to do that here. We're excited by sort of the components around sort of managing congestion. It's clear that while it'll be important to build a new parking garage downtown, it's clear that now and certainly in the future, how people move about in urban cores is going to change. So we need to have sort of design pick up and drop off locations for Uber and Lyft and the variety of those things. We need to have sort of valet options about how to move people and cars around in this complex place, and sort of how we structure our sort of the delivery of goods that support the businesses downtown. So there's a number of pieces I think that we can get smarter about as we go into this sort of strategic look at sort of how our parking structure is created to basically optimize sort of the spaces we have that are adjacent to CDAC, and frankly to start to figure out the revenue piece that will augment all the sort of important changes that we'd like to bring. So the elements of that, and then I'll wrap it up, is really to create a parking-based strategy that directs long-term users to existing off-street garages and short-term customers to the Hillman Garage. Eventually it'll be updated and really and trying to implement flex rate parking to encourage sort of quick turnarounds of customers in the more desirable locations, and figuring out a strategy around how long the meters are for, why they are sort of in a smarter network, so that we can sort of drive folks to where the best opportunities are. So I look forward to asking any sort of and be able to answer any sort of questions about that as we get into it. But it's an exciting exciting time to be considering all these opportunities.
Thanks so much, Ian. The next slide is a slide which very quickly will give you just some of the changes in terms of circulation for not just cars, but pedestrians, bikes, and a variety of other major enhancements. We're going to be turning now to Bryce Turner, who will be sharing with you the details of this amazing, proud public space. Next slide, Kate and Bryce Turner. Slide after that.
Thanks, Eileen. It's great to see so many people out there today, this morning. I'm a little surprised though half of you are still in your pajamas. This is a two-way webcam, Just kidding. But so I first began my involvement with Annapolis CDAC about 18 months ago. and it was through a ULI Baltimore technical advisory panel. And I had done these technical advisory panels in Dallas and a couple in Washington and Baltimore. And I have learned that the most difficult aspect of these is the follow-up and the implementation, which can always be challenging. But when I got to Annapolis, I realized that this was going to be different this time because I met Mayor Buckley, and his energy and his entrepreneurship, I think, is exactly what we need to make this happen. And then I further met Historic Annapolis and realized that the preservation community and also the community itself was really involved in this. And so ULI had a couple of really significant observations and some recommendations. And a couple of those are obvious, I think, to people. When you look at this slide and you see City Dock, and as the mayor said, you see the best parking in Annapolis is right along the water's edge, which is really amazing when you think about it. But when you think about the things that what you love about Annapolis and the places where you go, they tend to be near the Market House and up Main Street and some of the restaurants and shops around the Market House. They're not necessarily adjacent to the best parking that's there in town. So obviously, by creating a place here at the end of City Dock and extending it through towards the Market House, we can make a great place. The other observations, really among many, were that we have the Burgess House, which is a historic structure that is located just next to the brick area here at Susan Campbell Park. I don't have pointers, so I don't think I can show you that. But you also will notice that the traffic circle is there as well in Annapolis. And we all tend to think of that traffic circle, which does a great job of moving traffic, but it's not great necessarily for pedestrians and takes up a lot of room. So those were some of the observations. And then the recommendations, as you've heard from Eileen and others, involve getting people back to the water's edge and allowing people to experience the programming and the opportunities that exist at City Dock and make it the community living room space where people want to congregate. And I think even after this, this crisis we're going through at the moment, that we're all being remote and sheltering in, I think people are going to come out in abundance when they have opportunities for places like the new City Dock. So next slide, please, Kate. So this plan, as the mayor and Eileen said, the consensus plan, I actually like to call it also the consensus diagram, because it's really not a final plan yet. It still needs some work. And so there's still some work to be done, but what it does show is a strategy for how to move forward. And the main thing that you notice, of course, is the large City Dock Park. And what a difference, that makes to be able to filter water before it runs off into the harbor from a parking lot. It'll now be able to slowly absorb in this pervious park. And the second thing about the park I'll mention is we're bringing it up to elevation 8 feet above sea level, approximately. And that's going to really help become part of the barrier from flooding from the rising seas at the harbor City Dock. And you'll see a series of steps around this park that we'll look at in a couple of the next couple of renderings, but you will also see along Compromise Street and in front of what's currently Mission Barbecue, we reserved and kept some parking there for convenience. And because on Dock Street, I think people enjoy some of the quirkiness of the buildings not lining up, the street coming through, and some parking being there, but we do want to brick that area if possible and make it more of a pedestrian area. At the traffic circle, there was a lot of discussion about eliminating it, and I think people in this audience can probably appreciate that, so that it could become maybe more of a pedestrian area. But what we did find, because the traffic circle means a lot to a number of people in Annapolis, is that we can improve the circulation around it, and we can make it a better pedestrian zone. And so you saw on one of the previous diagrams, and you see here, we're adding new landscaping and new walking surfaces around that traffic circle, as well as next to the Market House. So we're finding every square foot we can of additional space that can be used for pedestrian uses rather than just for the automobile. And I think that's important. Next slide, Kate. So one of the most important things was to be able to create a continuous promenade around the entire city dock. And we're doing that, we're working on city land. And we're not at the moment addressing private land, but that's really will come next, and private owners have to get on board with that. I think first we have to put the framework in for how we can do these improvements. So with that continuous walkway all the way from the Naval Academy to the Marriott, I think it'll be an opportunity for people to really experience the waterfront, to enjoy the programming that's going to happen that Eileen talked about. But we're really looking at several parcels here. And so it's not just the parking lot that's there currently, but all of this. And as was well pointed out, we want to really address the needs of mobility here. It's more about mobility than parking. So we'll be able to go from the Hillman Garage and the other garages in the city and other surface parking areas and have ride sharing drop-offs and bus drop-offs that will make sense with this new plan. So next slide, please, Kate. Additionally, something that's very important is Annapolis is obviously the historic preservation. And it's such a beautiful city. The approach to City Dock from Main Street, when you're walking down Main Street, is really amazing. You can see all the way out to the Chesapeake Bay and to the Severn River. So City Dock, it's really important that we not build a lot of structures on City Dock that simply block that view. It's got enough competition from sailboats, which is fine. So you can see that we kept this view corridor open, and that we plan to reduce the size of the Harbor Master building, which is just to the top of the dotted line there. Reduce the size of that. We were not able to remove it completely because of some utilities, because of pumps that are required for some of the backflow that the mayor mentioned. But it will be a reduced size structure and be reconfigured. Next slide, please, Kate. So this is an early rendering that was completed 6 months ago, I guess, 9 months ago. And that gives you an idea of what it will look like when completed. And again, this is not a final design by any means. It's going to evolve, but this is the bones of what we're really looking at. So at the very end of the pier there, you see the Susan Campbell Park that we think can be improved with some green space and some shading, some trees, so that more events can occur there. And then you'll see the steps that wrap around the majority of the City Dock Park, and where you see the Maryland flag there potentially on a pavilion type building, a temporary structure that's built. We found from some old Sanborn maps where some of the existing buildings had been at City Dock, and we think we might be able to ghost in some buildings like that to use for shading and or temporary pavilions for concessions. And then a splash pad moving towards Mission Barbecue there, and the former Harbor Master building that I mentioned, which will be used for pumps, et cetera. But you see the steps, so that the grade steps down to the elevation at the promenade. And the elevation at the promenade along the boats obviously is important for boat access, but that will allow for some flooding to occur. And then the bulkhead that's currently in place around City Dock, which is around elevation 5, will be raised, and in order to prevent flooding, and so that we should be able to take care of hurricanes like we've had in the past, even when sea rise might get up to 6, 7, 8 feet above sea level. Next slide, please. So then looking back the other direction, you can see the splash pad in the foreground on the lower left portion of the image, and the new pump house building that will be there, and some of the stepping that I mentioned before. You also see the drop off. I just want to point to the bottom left of the screen. There would be the drop off for ride sharing and for buses and access. Next slide, please. And then looking at a lower angle here, you can see the State House in the background and the opportunity for programming that happens at Susan Campbell Park. It's kind of set up as a wedding in this particular image. But I think you get the idea that we will now have a green park. And as some of the community said, let's take the ing out of parking and make a park here at City Dock. Next slide. The traffic circle with some of the additional landscaping that I mentioned and the expanded park area next to the market house. Next slide. Looking from an aerial view. And last slide, Kate, which I believe is the last one, which is the overall view in a proud public space, which is what we all envision here. So we're very excited about this. It's been a tremendous effort and one that's been incredibly energizing. You know, certainly a project that I was really pleased to be a part of on a volunteer basis, and I'm looking forward to seeing its completion. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you all. We are very excited to now hear your questions and have a dialogue with all of you who've joined us today.
So yes, Eileen, we have a question. It looks like maybe for John. Wondering what the timeline is for the demolition and the reconstruction of the Hillman Garage.
I can probably answer that question. The timeline right now, assuming everything stays on track, is that this firms will be in place, we expect this summer. We would then, in the fall, they would be doing the whole range of geological and other studies that need to take place. And we would hope the demolition would start this winter, and by this coming winter, whether that would be January, February, March of 2021, the demolition is going to be a time that we're going to have this City Dock Action Committee implementation team is going to be working very closely with the residents and the businesses during that time, because that will be the time of certainly some disruption. And they'll also be put in place an alternative interim parking strategy. So that will start in the winter.
Also, sorry, I've got a couple of things I'm looking at here, so apologize. Do any of the panelists have an idea of how many new jobs that these projects will create?
I would put that question to either the mayor or to Bryce.
Mayor Buckley?
So Bryce,
The number of jobs.
Yeah. Yep. So, you know, I do want to just get a shout out if I can, very quickly before I answer that question. You know, timing is everything. I believe a good community space builds good community. And during this process, we have had an amazing partnership with Historic Annapolis and their leadership in Robert Clark. And without that partnership, and without the partnership of the Naval Academy, I don't think this would go forward. So the timing is perfect for us to move forward on this project, because we know the Naval Academy cannot just protect itself and then push all the water into the historic district, and that we know the leadership of Historic Annapolis is very cognizant of building this amazing historic city for the future. So we've been lucky to have them as partners throughout this, and without them, there would be no plan here. The other part that is important about this is that, you know, $50 million, $80 million or whatever the project takes to finish, obviously is going to create a ton of local jobs, a ton of economic development. It is undeniable what things like the High Line have brought to Manhattan. That mile and a bit of redevelopment stimulated billions of dollars of improvements around that project. We know that will happen around this project that will upgrade the buildings around it, will raise the bar for retail. So it brings a lot of things besides the jobs. I don't have a count on that, but we know when you inject that kind of money into a community, you are going to get very positive effects.
Yeah, I think there's certainly an opportunity for hundreds of jobs, including and beginning with the construction effort, which would be, maybe 150 jobs alone just to begin with Hillman, and then the construction of the park. And then through the additional opportunities at restaurants and shops that will be located adjacent to the park, as the mayor said, is a really great opportunity. And that's where we think a lot of the stimulus will happen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question we have is maybe if someone could share a little more detail in reference to any traffic management systems that might be able to direct people to available parking. I don't know if that's something, Ian, maybe for you.
Sure. So I think where we're at in that phase, is really trying to figure out sort of what, as John laid out, like, what funds are available in the near term to be able to sort of go out with an RFP and look at those options of what might be available to implement here. So I think, we have a number of folks who were involved in this group, in our work group, I think, who would have sort of that sort of expertise to be able to help the city sort of make smart choices about what to implement. But at this point, it's much more about trying to sort of start this downtown strategic parking plan and put those pieces in place so we can make those decisions. And Eileen, you have a little more that you'd like to say about that?
What I would say is that part of the request for proposals included an interim parking strategy that would go take place as soon as the selected firms are up and running, which would be probably in the fall, because it'll be necessary to have this whole electronic aspect that the city has been, that there's a lot of opportunity to do much more with, and that is so that people will have apps, they will know where they can park, they will know where to be directed so that they're not heading down to Hillman. This will all have to be coordinated with the surface lots and certainly with options such as an immediate combination shuttle, jitney, and valet. So that plan, the interim plan, will come forward in the fall.
And it is also a great opportunity for us to recondition people. So we have a lot of parking in this city. It's just not on the water. And people have been conditioned to go to the water. Now we have a chance to recondition people to make them realize that on the weekend and that 7 nights a week, there is a ton of parking. It is at the top of Main Street, not at the bottom of Main Street. So we'll have a chance to program, put some of our city employees in other locations and get them sort of used to that aspect. We know that whoever we select, and we're down to the 2 last bidders, whoever we select will have to have a strong program in place. And that will be, like Eileen said, valet, stacking parking in certain locations. We will have to increase the frequency of the shuttles to probably on the 10 minutes and make it reliable, make it free, and recondition people in terms of using that asset and making it part of the experience when they come to the city of Annapolis.
And panelists, that I should have mentioned this earlier. Sorry, I'm new at this. That question was from John Castanaboli. I'm probably butchered his last name. Sorry about that, John. We have a next question from Dave Jones. Does this redevelopment consider sea level rise plus storm surge? Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
I think perhaps I can address that too. I mean, that is the idea. A lot of the nuisance flooding that's been happening here has really been of a backflow type, and due to a number of things, obviously. And so the idea is to really create flood barriers and to build up CDAC to an elevation of either 8 and being able to expand it perhaps as much as 10. And that would be through natural barriers like the park and the steps that I mentioned, but also potentially some mechanical devices. And so a lot more will be learned, and all that has to be engineered, of course, moving forward. But that's the idea, and coordinating with the Naval Academy so that we don't get any backdoor, obviously, water coming into the space. But, you know, if we can get to elevation, up to elevation 10, I think that would be excellent.
Great, thank you, Bryce. We have another question from John Contestabilli. So I'm so sorry, John. I'm trying. What are the plans to include communication enhancements such as Wi-Fi, 5G with it while construction is being done?
What I can say is that we are having meetings right now with Baltimore Gas and Electric, with Sam DuPont from BG&E to look at all of that, and that will also be something that the selected firms will be addressing. Bryce, do you want to add anything to that?
No, but I do think it's important, and there's all kinds of smart city applications that can happen here in terms of communication, in terms of opportunities with smart grid, et cetera, that will definitely be explored, I'm sure, because it makes sense. You have this once in a lifetime opportunity to redo this area, so it needs to be wired and ready to go for the future for flexibility. Wi-Fi is relatively easy, of course.
Thank you. Next question from Joe Ozelas. Are there any large employers in downtown Annapolis that have contributed to the current parking challenges?
I'll start with that then, Gavin. I'll kick this over to you. I'm not sure if the question is they've contributed to the challenges or the successes. What I can say, I'll answer from the positive, that we've had, when you look at the large employers downtown, we have the state, we have St. John's, we have the Naval Academy, plus we have, in addition to what people think of as our restaurants and our boutique shops, we have a tremendous amount of service providers downtown, insurance companies, funeral parlors, churches. So we are now at this point starting to meet with all of those people over the next few months to talk about how, particularly in the interim, we can start sharing and have some joint use of, particularly during the weekend, spaces that are not being used by the private sector then. Gavin, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I would say there has been contribution from all of the big employers around the city. Obviously, the Naval Academy and the State Capitol are our two biggest drivers. The city of Annapolis is, a big user of the garage that we're about to replace. The St. Mary's, one of our big high schools and schools, is downtown. A lot of people would say, you're crazy to get 100 people in a committee, you will get nothing done because there'll be so many opinions. But it is actually the opposite. People really came together, they thought of each other's needs, they came up with a consensus plan. And so now, lots of stakeholders, lots of those organizations feel connected to this project because they've been part of the process. And we're going to make sure that they shepherd this through to the finish line.
That's a really good point. One of the things that I really didn't talk about was the action committee, but which Eileen and the mayor did. But building a consensus like that is one of the really unique things about this Annapolis City Dock effort, and why I also think it's going to happen. You often don't get that kind of buy-in from communities, and I've worked with communities, around the world. So it is very, very exciting.
Thank you. We have our next question from Samuel DuPont. Could you comment on smart energy related attributes of the plan, including EV chargers for buses, cars, outdoor lighting, solar, or other priorities of the team? Thank you.
So Sam recognized that I threw his name out there. Hello, Sam. There are, and I'm going to kick this to both Ian and Bryce. There is a lot of, in the early recommendations, there's a lot of reference to all of these things. Ian, do you want to pick that up, or Bryce?
Well, a couple of things that I can mention, and Ian would probably mention the same things, but at Hillman, obviously, there's a great opportunity for EV charging, and I'm sure that's going to be part of the final solution, and that's been a recommendation from the Action Committee, which is very exciting. There's also the opportunity for solar panels at Hillman Garage. Probably not so much at City Dock here, but certainly at the garage. And the last thing I would mention is there's also opportunities at Hillman Garage for adaptability in the future, to look at other uses there, perhaps when cars are not quite as prevalent as they are today. And I think that's an exciting opportunity.
I just reinforce that. I think that's exactly right. Right. I mean, we're building a garage that hopefully the next one will have a 50-year lifespan. So we should be building it, sort of with all the elements that are available today, sort of in that space, and we need to be doing that in retrofitting, in some of the other city garages currently. There's already sort of EV charging, but I mean we need to really ramp that up at all the all the different city assets. So there's sort of anytime you're doing this sort of project, obviously there's great opportunity to sort of catch up with the moment.
And I would add to that as we do this project for the historic city of the future that we live in, the garage that we build, we will make sure that at least the top 2 floor plates are built flat, so that in that time, 10 years or 20 years from now, when we are not driving as much, when we're all getting around in autonomous vehicles, as they say we will be, that we won't need a garage that's 800 cars. So we can convert the top floors to apartments or offices. We will make sure, obviously, that there is EV charging. Even the downtown is encouraging alternate types of transit, whether it's a bike or a scooter or an electric bike or whatever it is. That's the sort of place you're going to want to come downtown. Not only are we doing this at City Dock, but we are connecting, organizing a whole program of greenways throughout the city, so that you can get from one side of the city to the other and not have to use a car.
Thank you. Next question from Mark Smith. Could you repeat how many stories the Hillman Garage would be, and where will people park during that construction?
There are 2 things. The Hillman Garage, we will be getting, or we have gotten some detailed proposals from the firms that are competing for this bid. And depending on the size, because the size can go anywhere from 550 to 700 cars, and also depending on whether the city wants to go down a level or not, will determine the height of the garage. But it's certainly, we're not looking at anything that would be higher than the area we have today. With that said, Bryce, do you want to pick up the other part of that question?
Well, it'll be approximately 6 levels, but real within the existing envelope of the existing Hillman Garage, more or less, certainly. There will be no high-rise parking structures in downtown Annapolis.
Thank you. Sorry. Next question. It may have been answered. I apologize. I'm trying to keep up. But it's from Franz von Wagenberg. How long again would it take to construct the garage? And I think, Eileen, you said it would be open by 2022. So I was trying to go by my memory as well.
Very, very good, Gina. Now, what that is predicated on is, remember, there will be archaeological and geological studies. Let's assume that there's not any great surprise in there. Then the expectation would be, if construction or demolition is started this winter, that the construction and demolition should take place within a year, absolute max a year and a half. So 2022.
And I would also like to point out that the Hillman Garage has been at the end of its useful life for years now. If you've ever been in it, you can tell that. And so I came into office, there wasn't one plan, not one architectural drawing, not $1 put away for this. And what is so fantastic about this program is that we're going to get it funded without going to the local taxpayer directly. We know it's a lucrative asset. It's one of our most lucrative assets, and we're going to leverage that private asset to not only raise money to build us a new garage, but also spin money off for the city dock project. And we'll ground lease that for 20 years, 30 years, whatever it takes to pay back the investment and whatever the company has to get back out of the project. And then we will be handed back the improvement without any cost directly to the taxpayer. And, I can't say enough about the financial team that's been put together, the volunteers who are very, very smart and have come up with these clever ways to get this done. Thank you, John Hammond.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike Fisher had a question, but I'm not sure, you may have just answered that, Mayor Buckley. He had just mentioned, that it sounds like it would be more of a modified P3 type funding situation with possible Medco and MSA, as John had mentioned. So I don't know if there's anything else. I feel like you might have answered that in the other answer.
Let me throw that to John. John, would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, the devil's always in the details, and particularly on a project like this. One of the things that we have to respect as part of this overall project is that the existing parking garage at Hillman does provide some substantial financial support to the city's overall operating budget. So to the extent that we divert some of the, I would call it excess cash flow from the Hillman Garage to support some of the resiliency efforts, that may create a hole in the city's operating budget, which will then be reflected in perhaps higher tax rates to the citizens of Annapolis, which obviously, as the mayor is fully aware, is a potential problem. So we think that we can put together a plan that will not require that burden being increased on the existing property taxpayer. And what shape that takes is going to be a function of how much support do we get from the federal and state government for the resiliency efforts, and what other revenue sources that we may be able to devote to pay for the debt service on the resiliency efforts. There's no question that the Hillman parking garage will generate sufficient funds to pay for itself and throw off additional funds. And then again, we got to make sure that we don't put a hole in the city's budget while we're trying to plug the hole in the dike as far as resiliency efforts downtown. But all things considered, I think that we have produce some alternative financing plans that will allow us to not have a negative impact on the city's existing budget, but also provide the financial resources to pay for the resiliency efforts.
Thank you.
Just one caveat: the current economic impact that we're experiencing nationwide certainly has pointed out from a firsthand experience the importance of tourism and the service industry to the city's overall economic base, and it really is an eye opener that to see the impact of the current situation on the economic viability of downtown Annapolis. But this hopefully is going to be short-lived with the passage of this federal program and the work that's being done to mitigate the impact of the pandemic.
Thanks, John. We have a question from Makiko Land asking, how can local engineering companies have opportunities to bid on the projects?
So the process has been one of putting out a bid on the entire request for proposals on the large combination of the redevelopment of CDAC as well as construction of Hillman Garage. What we anticipate at this time is that one of the two firms, and these are not actually firms, they're consortiums, each of several firms, we expect will be granted that umbrella bid. Then within that process, there very likely will be certainly additional construction bidding, and we would know that we would know what that would be by the summer. In other words, we'll know, have one of the two larger consortium firms been granted this proposal, and then how will they be looking for local support? We'll know that by, I would say, by June or July.
Thank you. We have another question from Mark Thompson. Aside from the race park, what are the other resiliency strategies?
That's a good question, because the strategies come in the form of some. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
They come in the form certainly of the park, but there are also will be actually flooding devices starting at gate 1 all the way around to the Fleet Reserve. Bryce, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think there will be mechanical engineered solutions here probably as well. You know, historic communities like this are so close to the water because the water was always the lifeblood of any community in the 1800s and 1700s. And so we have a historic community that needs to be preserved, and we're not going to be able to move all these structures, obviously, in this situation. So we can't simply retreat. You know, we have to actually have flood barriers, and we think the park is a beautiful way to do a flood barrier. But there will also be mechanical devices that will be flip type panels, perhaps. They still need to be designed and engineered, but there are a lot of good mechanical devices out there that can be deployed in the event of a storm surge or a hurricane of any type. So that's about all I can say for now, because that work just hasn't been done yet.
And we have actually a comment from Ken Brannon, Leadership Maryland. Kudos to the team. As a business owner in Annapolis for more than 40 years, I'm grateful for this project. Will secure a bright future for the city, indeed for the entire area. So he just wanted to say thank you all.
Thank you.
Let's see, got some more questions here. Let's see. Hello from the U.S. Naval Academy Visitor Center. The elephant in the room is our current status worldwide. Many of our local partners in tourism are currently struggling to stay afloat. We look forward to utilizing this project as a way to bring tourism back, driving economic benefit to local business. Please continue to remember how very important allowing access for group tourism to downtown Annapolis will be. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Also, we have another
I'd like
question.
to add to that. Can I
Sure.
add to that? You can see when you go to the visitor center at the Naval Academy, the intention there. There was an amazing a promenade that was constructed at what is called Gate 0 of the Naval Academy. And you could see the intention was to continue from our city dock along that beautiful promenade. And then 9/11 happened, and the gates went up and the access was blocked. So we believe the beautification of City Dock will stimulate that connection to happen again. And you will be able to, at certain times, use Gate 0 and continue that beautiful walk around the waterfront, and then maybe back through some of the assets in the Academy and either onto the Maryland Ave or onto Gate 1 and then back into the city again. But if you ever get a chance to go there, you can see what the intention was, and we're excited to sort of re-stimulate that.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a question from Colleen Bachelet. Will there be inclusions requirements for WBE and MBE firms for the design and construction projects?
Yes, that's all part of the city's procurement process.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll. We have several questions. I'm trying to scroll through really quickly. I remember one. Hang on one second. Sorry, scrolling. From, I believe, John Constable. Thank you, John, for texting in how to pronounce your name. So thank you so much. Has the team looked to New York City, who has a similar plan for ideas?
You know, that's a great question. We had on the team, one of the people we had on the team, Zoe Johnson, is the person who leads the resiliency effort at the Naval Academy, and she had certainly has had involvement with what New York City was doing. And we also had Dan Nees is on the team from the University of Maryland, who, and I believe the mayor joined him when they went, they didn't actually go to New York City, but they went to Newport and some other locations in Rhode Island to see what those jurisdictions have been doing. So the answer is that our resiliency team was out looking at New York, Hoboken, Newport, as well as other jurisdictions. Charleston, we had Mayor Riley, who's an amazing person. He was mayor there for 40 years. Joe Riley in Charleston came to speak with all of us about their efforts as well.
And I should add that the financial tools team has been asking the mayor to allow us to go visit Venice and Amsterdam.
That's in the budget.
Sign me up.
And I think also, as the mayor mentioned earlier, the High Line has been an inspiration, obviously, because you see the economic development that happens around that type of investment. And while there was a lot of push to build buildings on this city dock, certainly the design team and I think all the committees of the action group really wanted to make this a stimulus for new economic development around it and to help revitalize existing structures and businesses that are already there. So the High Line, I think, is a great example.
Thank you. We have another question from Allison Porter. Mayor Buckley, Annapolis is larger than City Dock. How will the development of this plan help the city focus on other tidal flooding neighborhoods such as Eastport?
That's a really good question. This is just a starting point, and this is the one that probably has the most momentum and the time. Like I said, the Naval Academy are moving full steam ahead to design a barrier or a berm or whatever that is. We need to harness that as it happens, that partnership as it happens. We also have a garage that is very in close proximity. We're going to expand and theoretically take 100 cars off of City Dock and inject that into the new expanded garage. So we have a few things that work for us timing wise, but that definitely is just the beginning of the challenges that are ahead of us. Eastport is definitely probably our next focus to get on. We have created a financing authority, and that is going to give us a financial tool to work on other parts of the city. We have to start somewhere, and City Dock is the starting point. And then we have to move on to the rest of the city immediately.
Thank you. We have a question from Joe Azalis. Thank you, Joe, for helping me with your pronunciation. With the emerging sustainability efforts in Annapolis, have you considered joining the 2030 district network of cities?
Gavin, are you aware of the details of that?
So I definitely interface with a lot of cities in terms of what they are doing. I think mayors are definitely a ground zero for resiliency. We are the ones that have to tackle this day to day. And so I would say I'm involved with a lot of different groups. I've talked on a few different panels. I think in Annapolis is going to be a model for the rest of the country on just this one initiative, not only what we build, but the way we finance it. So, but I'm continually looking at best practices and ideas around the country and the world. So I'm sure I'll be part of that. And other associations.
Thank you. And just one last comment before we wrap this up. I would like to read from Sam Minetti, who is with WSP and is also our chair of the BWI Business Partnership. Thank you, Sam, for joining us this morning. Sam wrote, on my behalf, thanks to the presentation team, Mayor Gavin, and the BWI Business Partnership Board of Directors. We, the board, appreciate what, this is very sweet, Baltimore, our organization staff has done for this time of crisis. Please finally add thanks to every of the participants here on this webinar, and hope that you all stay safe and staying healthy. So thank you to my chair. I appreciate that message. And with that, I know we can't clap, which is really a bummer because our panelists did a fabulous presentation this morning. I think we got to most of the questions. I did try to weed out a couple that sounded very similar. So hopefully no one is upset with me that I did not get to their question. Again, I'd like to thank Mayor Buckley, Eileen Fogarty, John Hammond, Ian Pfeiffer, and Bryce Turner this morning, and to all of you that participated on this first webinar. And a quick shameless plug for the BWI Business Partnership. We are featuring another free webinar, actually coming up fast and furious on Tuesday, because the information is so rapidly changing and getting ready to go into effect here on April 2nd. Please join us when we have Amy Polifrone, President and CEO of HR Strategy Group, along with Donna Miracle, present all the employer resources for your businesses to help get you through this crisis of COVID-19. We also hope to have a few more webinars here in the near future, so more to come on that. And we hope that you all stay well, and we look forward to actually seeing everyone in person very soon. I for one, I miss it. So thank you again to everyone. Have an awesome day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Gina.
lot.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
See you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you all. You did a fantastic job. I'm always so amazed at how quick everybody is on their feet and all the information. And Gavin, thanks for staying with us the whole morning.
Yes,
Thank you, everybody.
Stay well.
Stay
Have a great day.
safe. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Jenny.
Bye-bye.